Somebody working with Atlas with the rope. He had quite a bit of a fear of ropes, and I worked a lot on getting him over that, so I just wanted to make sure he was cool with all the things that ropes do. So slide on the ground, hang on the fence, touch him, all this stuff. So now that I've started pairing the rope with food, he's gone so much faster. He really understands the lesson. So I just start by kind of having him look at the rope just, he can touch the rope touches his neck, and then he gets reinforced. So, and I started this with like a much smaller rope, and now he's to the longer one. There's more movement there, so you can go back and look at his other videos and see that process. Or experimented quite a bit with trying to get him used to the rope here, and this works the best. So gonna have the rope touch him, and then I'm gonna click and feed. And he was kind of worried about like hanging rope, stuff like that. So then I'm just trying to get him cool with the rope touching all over his body. So be that on the side, be that tossing up on him, and he's pretty cool with that. And like having it go up, we've kind of worked on a little bit where it's going up, I'm clicking as it's like kind of tossing through the air and on him, and then also having the rope like now where it's laying across his back. So clicking as it's laying on his back is another thing that he had to get used to. So and just kind of laying it on different parts. So his hindquarters on his back, and that looks pretty good. He's got his ears back, just listening to like where the rope is. It doesn't seem like he's worried very much. I maybe a little bit more like love a lowered neck would be good, but again, we're kind of in the beginning stages of this where we're really starting to progress, but we still have like other stuff to work on. So again, over the hocks, around the front legs, this looks pretty good. I don't like having the lead rope like attached to the halter at this point. I don't want it swinging around his face. That's just too much stuff for him. Other horses would be okay with that. It's just too much stimulation for Atlas. So I just have the rope loose. And same thing, front legs. If the rope's on those front legs, I'm clicking and feeding. Right now it's like over his withers. I'm clicking and feeding for that. Over his back. So all of this looks pretty good, and he's pretty consistent. Like he's moving his ears. Pretty good. I'm just going to work my way down here, so I'm clicking here and then feeding. And I'll let it slide off. Work on hindquarters, and if I miss, it's not a big deal. Like, I just let the rope kind of fall down him, and then at some points I'll reinforce that. But if, like, it's kind of a good thing if you're really bad with ropes because it kind of slides over him, you kind of miss, and then he gets used to ropes kind of flying around, and it's not a big deal. So, I don't ever plan on like roping with this horse, but he needs to be cool with ropes being around him. Like if he were to somehow like get loose, or I drop the rope and the rope's on the ground, or it's on his back or whatever, like he's got to get used to those things. It's just part of being a horse that lives with humans. So um but yeah, I'm kind of swinging the rope on his belly. Again, this is going to be rope or cinch preparation with the rope. So lots of swinging it on his legs, swinging under his belly. All of that's going to pay off later on when pretty much everything that I put on him is going to swing around. We've got blanket straps and blankets and saddle pads and girths and all kinds of stuff. My leg. So all of this is building up. Like it looks like, okay, well, he's cool with the rope, but it's going to build into other objects as well. So now I'm just going to kind of use just the end of the rope, same kind of thing. This time I'm just more so clicking as that rope's going up on him. So like here, click, let it fall off, and then feed. So we've been doing a lot of this and building up to what you just saw where we've got the rope on and it can sit on him for a few seconds while I feed him, because that's just another separate thing. It looks like the same thing, but it's not. It's like getting the rope on is one thing and then leaving it on is another thing specifically for him. Like with Castor, he's a completely different horse. Like he was cool with the rope from like day one. He was just like, okay, fine. Like I was leading him within a couple days. Atlas has been a long time, so but each horse is different. So um, Atlas is a lot more like we have to break things up a lot more for him, but I've learned a lot more from him as well because I had to do those things. So same thing. We're gonna do this on the other side. Swing that rope over his back. And again, I'm clicking as that rope's going over and then pulling it off and reinforcing. And then kind of tossing that rope under his neck. So a rein or like if I toss the rope up the other way, it kind of swings around his neck. All of this stuff is really important. Ropes going around his face, all of that. It's also a good idea to have this rope not attached to those halters just in case he were to run off. I don't want to have my hand in there. And I mean, my goal is to not to get to that behavior of running off, but just being safe and kind of managing those ropes kind of work out a little bit better. I can just drop the rope at any point in time and it doesn't matter. Like for most domestic horses, you could do this online and it wouldn't be a big deal. But I don't want to scare him more if this rope was on him and he ran or moved for some reason and then thought the rope was chasing him. That would just scare him more. So I want to make sure he's cool with all of that without the rope on before I attach him. So then I'm going to do a little bit of a review, some leading stuff. We've been doing a lot of that. We've mostly been doing that with the target, so he's really soft and good with the halter. And now I want to work on just kind of getting him used to that halter rope moving around, or that lead rope moving around when it's attached to the halter. So do that first part like we just showed without it attached, and then when he's totally cool with it, then attach the rope, because we can't really do this part without the rope attached. But at this point I'm like, okay, he's cool with it, he's good with it, like he's not going to go anywhere, because I don't want him to scare himself more. So, and then I do little baby steps, like I just kind of swing it up for his nose and then kind of halfway through space and then kind of up by his eyes there. He's a little bit worried, but I'm just swinging it up there, and then as it swings, I'm reinforcing. So it doesn't really matter what his like reaction to it is. I'm just, every time the rope moves, he's getting a click and a treat. I'm just conditioning it. That's all I'm doing. It's not really determining, his behavior doesn't determine what he's getting. He might get a little bit more if he's being really great, but I was just like, every time the rope moves, something awesome happens, and that's all we're working on. And I want that rope to kind of stay up there a little bit. He's good with that. That might be scary for some horses, especially on the face. So that looked really good. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing with the whips. So kind of gets touched with the whip, and then while it's on him, I'm going to click and reinforce. So at this point, I just want him cool with having that touch there. And we did a lot of this, again, like after I first adopted him, and he was not cool with like me really touching him, but I wanted to get him used to like having that lash kind of swing around on him. So that was one of those things that really scared him. And I have like the driving whip, so it has a little bit shorter lash, so that kind of helps me out there. So swinging it on, as it's swinging on, I'm clicking and reinforcing. So I'm just using this whip as a as a tool to like reinforce. Just kind of starts that stimuli of kind of like being a rope and letting me touch him and stuff like that. So I'm not going to be chasing him with it, doing anything. I'm just getting him used to that movement, just using his stimuli. So the lash goes over his withers, and I'm clicking and feeding, and that looks really nice because that was one of the things that bothered him, and we're gonna kind of just working on that and making sure that looks good. So I like that I've left for a second and he's going over to target that rope. That's a pretty big deal, because that is what I want eventually as the finished behavior is I can hang that rope up and he just kind of hangs out there. That's what I want. I want that ground tie kind of thing, stand tied. If the horse can stand tied mentally when they're not actually tied, then they can definitely stand tied when they're physically tied. So that's the most important part. But I wanted to show that a little bit, and he's kind of exploring the whips as well, which is also a big deal for him. Targeting. Yeah. Okay, target here. So I'm gonna ask him to touch the rope he thinks maybe side pass toward. Nope, I'm gonna target here. He's still thinking side pass. There we go. I'm like, no, we're gonna target this rope instead. I think maybe he was confused because usually when I'm on the other side of the fence, I mean, I want him to side pass to me so that he's in this position. Because I think the last few videos I've been inside when we worked on tying, so I think he was just a little confused there, but that's okay. So I wanted to work a little on some leading and making sure he was cool with that. We did a lot of leading before, and then I kind of was like, oh, this is good, and then I left it, and I lead him mostly at Liberty, so I wanted to kind of go back through and make sure that he was cool with all of the rope cues and stuff like that. So I also want to work on him moving away from like a tactile cue, and at this point in time, I was not aware of like using the target to do so. So if I was going back and doing this now, I would be using the target to create that movement, versus right now I'm using negative reinforcement because I've got my hand on his side, and then he steps over, I release, and then I click and feed at the same time. So I'm kind of using both negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement, but if I was redoing it today, I would be using just the target. So my hand hand lays down, he steps over, I'm clicking and releasing at the same time and then feeding. So it's going to be different than if I was using a target. If I was using a target, I could have my hand as a tactile cue for a couple seconds, take it off, and then create that movement with the target, and eventually he would pair those two things together. So I have to do some sensitizing in between, make sure I can just touch on his side. There he kind of steps over, he kind of stepped forward more than anything. So I should be, if I had the target, I could help. Here he's not sure what to do. He's kind of taking steps forward, he's kind of taking steps sideways. Just having the target just makes things so much more clear to him. He doesn't have to try all these other behaviors. I'm showing him the behavior that he wants. So here he's backing up, kind of see a tail swish. I'm trying to help him out with the lead rope there, and then he figured it out. But you can see if I would have just used the target, it would be very clear right away, he'd get it done. But instead, when you're using negative reinforcement, you have to wait through all those behaviors. Now he's gotten it, and he's stepping over nicely, but you could see him kind of struggle and try, and like he was swishing his tail, and there was a lot more activity going on versus I could have just used the target. So this is a good example to show the difference between teaching these like moving away from pressure cues or these leg cues or whatever they might be, using negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement. So, or a combination with just positive reinforcement or the target. So that's pretty cool to kind of see the difference, because some horses, they might just get it and they might just step over, but what I've seen with my horses is there's a lot more tail swishing, there's a lot more movement when I use the negative reinforcement. So, and I want to keep them as happy as possible. I don't want them to think, because I'm going to use these cues on the like on the ground, but I'm going to use these cues under saddle eventually, and I don't want him to think, oh well, I put my hand on or my leg on and my first thing is like, this is annoying, I'm going to swish my tail. I don't want that. I want him to feel that and be like, oh, step over, okay. So I mean, he's stepping over. This looks pretty decent, but again, we have a little bit more tail swishing. Like right now he's just swishing at the flies. I'll try to point out when it's different. So hand is on. That was actually quite good. Like, again, some horses, they're totally cool with that. They'll move over. Some are more sensitive than others. That time, he looked totally fine. And lots of just kind of rubbing on him, petting on him. He needs lots of that. Get used to me touching him, reinforcing that too, because Atlas is one of those horses that touch is not just a thing that he wants on his own. That was actually very nice. He kind of started to step underneath himself. So he has to get used to liking touch or get rewarded for being touched, which is a very foreign concept for a lot of people. That was very nice. He stepped over really nicely there. I gave him a little bit of a jackpot. Ask him to back up. He's very soft on the lead rope. Kind of wanted to back toward me. That's all right. Just straighten him out. But he's got a pretty fast little backup. He responds really well to this tactile cue too, because I taught this as a tactile cue with a target. So there shouldn't be a lot of frustration or any frustration with this cue. Because other cues you've seen, like with moving the hindquarters over cue, you can see the difference where he's kind of swishing his tail a little bit, and you'll see that with my other horses. The same thing with the backup cue, specifically with Dakota. When I was doing that with only negative reinforcement with her, lots of tail swishing, very little backup, very little momentum, dragging her feet. When I was just using positive reinforcement, she backed right up. She's super fast, no tail swishing. Still a little bit of foot dragging just because she's a lazy horse, and that's just kind of how she moves, but so much different, much improved backup. So now we're going to work on those leading things, having him back up, having him go forward, just kind of getting him used to the different pressures on the halter. So forward, backward, having him stop, like all the things. We're just kind of run through all these things because it's been a minute since he's done those things, and I want to work on both sides. He's taught to lead on both sides, right and left. Probably not going to be on the right a whole lot, but I do want him to have that ability and not completely be like, I don't know what to do when there's someone on the right side, because I've seen horses, domestic horses, do that. So I wanted to make sure he was cool with all that. And I'm trying to work more off of that rope cue versus my body language cue, because he's used to my body language cue a lot, because I do leave him at liberty a lot, or most of the time. So I want to make sure he's very soft to that halter rope cue, and then going forward and backward. So, and he is soft because he got taught this with the target. So this looks great. Kind of gets a little stuck there, but that's okay. He'll figure it out because we don't lead a lot from this side. Good. And he kind of takes a step over, and I'll just reinforce those little moments where he needs help through it. But he looks really nice. He's following that rope well. The softest horses I've ever had are these Mustangs, and they've been leading for a little bit. I've had so many domestic horses where you've got to pull around and they don't want to come forward or that you can't get them to slow down. These horses are the softest horses I've ever had. It's amazing. Nice. Oh, he thinks he's supposed to side pass. That's okay. I'm just going to kind of keep asking. I can just ignore that and just ask for that back up. And really, I should have a target with me now because I can show him that behavior. He's just a little confused. He just thinks he's supposed to side pass. So I'm trying to give him a little bit more space so he's not near the rail so it's a little bit more clear to him. And then I'm just kind of wiggling a little bit. That's more of a cue than anything. Like it's really not even getting all the way to his halter. And that's what I want. I don't want to have to shake the rope and hit him under the jaw. I don't have any interest in that. I want just a cue for him to back up. That's what I'm looking for. He's kind of wiggling over. There we go. He kind of tips his hindquarters over. That's all right. I'm just going to keep asking until he can do a nice backup and having target the extra rope. This looks great. Really soft. Perfect. And then if I wanted to, I could ask for more steps backward too. I'm just kind of rotating between having him go backward and then come forward and touch that extra rope. Very nice. And this is kind of just some preparation stuff for tying. That's why I wanted to run through it, make sure he was cool with it. Because that's a big thing with tying is when they kind of feel that pressure, instead of panicking and pulling back, I want them to come forward. And the way you teach that is not by tying, it's by doing groundwork stuff like this with the halter and the lead rope. So that's why I wanted to run through it. So again, lots of him going backward and forward in response to that lead rope, that tactile cue from the lead rope. That's what I want to work on because the tying is what I'm really looking forward to. So just a little review so that he's used to that. And then also want to make sure he's not scared of that rope on his muzzle, like on the bottom side of his muzzle. He was afraid of that as well. So I just want to make sure he was cool with all this stuff since we hadn't done the leading stuff in a long time. And the leading stuff is really important for the tying stuff. This looks really great. This looks really nice. I mean, he's the same like momentum going forward and backward, really soft, not at all worried about the rope, all green lights here. Very nice. And really the thing that we need to work on a little bit more is just that rope kind of sliding down the panel because that was the thing he was kind of scared of. And I think he's going to be pretty good. Work on that. I'm going to start like sliding the rope through the halter because I don't want to attach it right away. Even though like nothing's tied on the panel, but I want to work on that. And then start clipping the rope to the halter again, just over the panel, and then I'll wrap it around the panel and kind of work through that or use a blocker tie ring, something like that. But that's kind of the process.